What you're seeing on your screen right now are red garnets, a type of precious stone that's actually very common across many regions of North America. And right in the middle of them, there's a diamond. Look closely at how much bigger the diamond is compared to the little red pebbles around it. But here's the question. How did a diamond end up sitting right in the middle of those little red stones?
Well, the truth is, they were separated by a prospector, using sieves and doing exactly what you're watching on screen right now. With this simple process, something anyone can replicate at home or right there at the river, he was able to sort the common minerals from the ones that actually matter.
In this case, the garnets and the highly coveted diamond. And just so you have a real sense of how well this works, this technique has been used for decades by professional prospectors. It's no secret in the world of geology. What happens is that most people have simply never taken the time to learn how it actually works. But before they were separated, these same materials looked like this, a dark pile of gravel, full of ordinary stones mixed with all kinds of minerals, looking completely random. And that's exactly why these spots go unnoticed every single day, by thousands of people walking along riverbanks without the slightest clue about what's sitting right under their feet. These deposits form underneath large rocks, with cavities carved out by erosion. Since diamonds and garnets are extremely heavy and dense minerals, when the force of the water drags everything downstream, these cavities in the rocks trap them there for good, until someone with the right knowledge comes along to pull them out. A lot of people even end up finding gold doing exactly this. That's the case, for example, with the prospector, who's been using this same technique for years, and shows in his videos just how much gold comes out of a single, well-chosen spot. In other words, these cavities work like natural vaults, where the current concentrates over decades or even centuries everything that's heaviest and densest. And it's exactly inside these points where whole diamonds, unbroken and intact, tend to pile up, protected by the weight of the rocks above and the stability of the spot. Now, before you rush out and start searching, there's something very important you need to know. If your region doesn't have the right geological formations for diamonds, there's no point in looking. You won't find a thing. That's why, before anything else, you need to learn which indicator minerals show up in your area. Because it might turn out that the place where you live doesn't just have diamonds and garnets, but also gold and other precious stones that are just as valuable, like rubies, for example. Because over the next few minutes, you're going to see exactly how these deposits form, why those little red pebbles are the most reliable sign out there, and which geological formations reveal the presence of these natural vaults, right within your reach. Now let's get into the part that really matters, because understanding why those little red pebbles sit next to diamonds depends on understanding how a river actually works. And the best way to picture this is to think of a river as a giant natural washing machine that's been running non-stop for thousands of years. Every time it rains hard, every time the water level rises, every time there's a flood, the river picks up everything from the bottom and shakes it around like a washing machine full of sand and rocks. Light material like leaves, small pebbles, and regular sand gets carried downstream easily, sometimes for miles. But heavy material behaves in a completely different way. Heavy minerals, and by heavy I mean anything with a density far greater than ordinary rock, basically refuse to travel. They sink fast, they fight against the current. They roll a few inches, maybe a couple of feet, and the moment the water loses strength, they stop. And here's where things get interesting. There's one specific type of spot in a river where heavy materials almost always pile up. And that spot is underneath the big boulders, inside the cavities and pockets that erosion carves out over time. Picture a big rock sitting in the middle of the riverbed. The water hits that rock, splits around it, and on the downstream side, it creates a small zone of turbulence. Inside that turbulence, the current actually scoops out little tunnels and hollows underneath the boulder, where the water still swirls around but has almost no strength to carry anything heavy back out. And over hundreds of years, every single flood that passes through brings a new batch of heavy material, dumps it inside that cavity, and moves on. That's why geologists call these spots natural traps. They are concentration points where thousands of years of river transport have piled up the densest materials the water can carry. And the list of what ends up in those traps is exactly what gem hunters dream about. Gold flakes and small nuggets. Black magnetite sand, which is that dark, shiny sand you sometimes see in streaks along the riverbank. Red garnets, which are the pebbles that open this whole conversation. And protected right next to them, often sitting undisturbed for centuries, the diamonds. This is why these cavities are so valuable. The average person walks along a river and sees a big boulder as nothing more than an obstacle. But for someone who understands how rivers work, every big stationary boulder in a gravel bed is a potential bank vault. And those red pebbles scattered around are basically the sign on the door, telling you the vault is there and ready to be checked. Now, there's one more detail that makes these natural vaults even more interesting. Diamonds have a property that protects them beautifully inside these traps. They are the hardest natural material on Earth, scoring a perfect 10 on the Mohs scale, which is the standard scale geologists use to measure how resistant a mineral is. So while softer stones get worn down, chipped, and broken by centuries of tumbling around in river gravel, a diamond inside a protected cavity survives completely intact. Now you might be wondering something. Out of all the heavy minerals in the world, why is it specifically those red pebbles that point to diamonds? And the answer has everything to do with where these red stones come from, which, surprisingly, is the exact same place where diamonds are born. They form more than 150 kilometers below the surface of the Earth, under the same extreme pressure and temperature conditions that create diamonds. And they travel up to the surface inside the same kind of volcanic pipe that carries diamonds along with them, a rare volcanic rock called kimberlite. So whenever a kimberlite pipe breaks through to the surface and starts eroding over millions of years, it releases both the diamonds and these red garnets into the surrounding landscape. They come out together, they get washed into rivers together, and they end up inside the same natural traps, sitting side by side at the bottom of those cavities. That's exactly why finding one of these red pebbles is such a strong signal. There are a few visual clues that help you identify them in the field, even without any equipment at all. Hold one up against the sunlight and you might even see a faint glow passing through the edge, because these garnets are often slightly translucent. And they feel heavy for their size. When you pick one up, it feels noticeably denser than a regular rock of the same dimensions.
And that extra weight is one of the most reliable signs that you've got something worth paying attention to.
Another important point is that these red garnets are tough. They sit around 7.5 on the Mohs scale, which means they easily survive the tumbling action of a river for thousands of years.
That's why they stand out so clearly in a gravel bed full of gray, brown, and tan ordinary rocks.
Whenever experienced prospectors find a single red garnet in a riverbed, they don't stop there. They immediately start working upstream.
Because the garnet didn't form where they found it, the river carried it to that spot. The original source, the kimberlite pipe that released it, is always somewhere further up. So finding one red pebble turns into a trail. Find a second red pebble a little higher up the river, and the trail gets stronger.
This is exactly how some of the most important diamond deposits in the world were originally discovered. Not by guessing, but following the indicator minerals. Now that you understand why the red pebbles matter and how the natural vaults actually form, let's talk about the practical side.
How do you read a river to find these spots? Because not every stretch of water is going to produce results.
The first thing to look for is the presence of large, stationary boulders in the middle of the riverbed. Small pebbles move during every flood, so they don't form stable traps. But a big boulder stays in place for decades, sometimes centuries. So when you scan a river, your eyes should immediately jump to the biggest rocks. Those are your primary targets, every single time.
The second thing to check is the shape of the riverbed around those boulders. Ideally, you want to find boulders that are sitting in a section where the water is changing speed.
That means places where the river goes from fast-moving to slow-moving, like right at the end of a rapid, where the water finally calms down, or the inside curve of a river bend, where the current loses energy and starts dropping everything it was carrying. The third detail is the type of gravel. If you look down and see a mix of stones in all different sizes, with sand, pebbles, and larger rocks together, that's good.
It means the river has been depositing material there for a long time.
Magnetite is another heavy mineral, and it tends to concentrate in exactly the same spots where garnets and diamonds end up. So dark streaks in the sand, combined with red pebbles scattered around, combined with big stationary boulders, is the exact picture you want to find. Once you identify a spot that checks all three boxes, the next step is to carefully work the area underneath and around the biggest rocks. And this is where patience becomes way more important than any fancy tool. You don't need a pickaxe. You don't need heavy equipment. What you actually need is a simple gardening trowel, a sieve, a bucket, a gold pan, or any shallow container that lets you swirl water around gently.
The idea is to scoop up the gravel from inside those natural cavities, screen out the big stones, and pan the finer material to see what stays at the bottom. When you pan correctly, the heavy material sinks and the lighter material washes off the top. What stays behind is what geologists call the concentrate.
In a good spot, you'll find a mix of dark magnetite sand, small red garnets, sometimes a few gold flakes, and, if you're patient and persistent, even a diamond.
And here's a practical field test that works surprisingly well. If you find a stone that you suspect might be a diamond, try to scratch a piece of regular glass with it. If it scratches cleanly, you're probably dealing with something very hard. Then try to scratch your stone with a quartz pebble. If the quartz can't leave a mark on it, that's another strong sign. These two simple tests, combined with the context of having found the stone inside a heavy mineral trap next to red garnets, are enough to separate a promising find from an ordinary pebble.
Always work your way upstream. If you find red pebbles in one spot, move your search a little further up and see if they continue. The density of the pebbles tells you how close you are to the source. Fewer garnets means the material has traveled a long distance. More garnets, closer together, means the original kimberlite rock is probably nearby. And if you stumble onto a stretch where the red pebbles are really concentrated, you might be standing directly on top of one of the most important geological finds of your life. And do you remember what I told you at the very beginning about other valuable stones that could be hiding in your own region? Well, everything you just learned about finding diamonds works for one more gemstone that occurs naturally right here in the United States. A gemstone that's just as valuable, just as sought after, and that hides in exactly the same kind of river deposits where the diamonds wait. That gemstone is the ruby, and they get carried to the surface through volcanic activity that leaves them mixed into the very same alluvial gravels where diamonds accumulate.
In states like Montana and North Carolina, river hunters have been pulling rough rubies out of the gravel for generations, using the exact techniques you just learned.
And every now and then, instead of a clear diamond, what comes out is a deep red crystal that can be worth thousands of dollars per carat. And here's the catch that trips most people up. A rough ruby in the field doesn't look anything like the polished stone you see in jewelry stores. It often looks opaque, dull, almost like a piece of dark red rock, and it can be extremely easy to confuse with a large garnet. Someone who doesn't know what they're holding will throw it back into the water without thinking twice. That's exactly why so many people find genuinely valuable stones and end up selling them for pocket change, or worse, losing them completely. Because the moment you don't recognize what's in your hand, the opportunity slips through your fingers forever.
And that's exactly why I put together the book, Gemology Journey for Beginners. It's the complete practical guide that walks you through, step by step, how to identify every type of gemstone you're likely to run into out in the field.
Using simple tests you can do at home with objects you already own. You'll learn how to check hardness, density, luster, and translucence.
You'll learn how to tell a real ruby from a red garnet, a rough diamond from a clear quartz crystal, and a valuable specimen from a stone that just looks interesting. It was written specifically for people who are just getting started and don't want to depend on anyone else's opinion to know what they actually found.
But if this isn't the right moment for you to grab the book, no problem at all. You can keep learning with us right here on the channel, completely for free. Just hit subscribe, hit the like button, and keep watching the next video that's already showing up on your screen. Thanks for liking and subscribing. Good luck, Gem Hunter.